it's an act of resistance against despair
Hmm.
and hopelessness. It's like you can just walk outside, put your hands in the dirt and grow something
Yeah.
to like be generative, instead of focusing on all of the things that might be taken away from you, which I can totally do all the time if I let myself.
Uh-huh.
It's like the opposite of that. It's focusing on, okay, but what can I plant? What can I grow? And I really feel like it reflects the heart of God, like this idea of creating new life.
Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation. Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Today is a conversation all about Thanksgiving. And not only are we talking about Thanksgiving, but also talking about gardening, because how could we not? And today's guest is JJ Heller. You've heard her song, Thanksgiving song, on Shine.fm this past season and this season as well. And she is joining us from Nashville, singer songwriter, has two kids and her husband as well. Thank you, JJ, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with Thanksgiving. We've been playing your song, Thanksgiving song, last season, this season. I love it. It's super just nostalgic for me just to think about memories I have made with my family at Thanksgiving, memories to be made. So tell me about for you, is this a glimpse into your Thanksgiving?
Well, my husband and I wrote this song with a friend of ours who's a songwriter, and we were just kind of reminiscing about what Thanksgivings were like when we were growing up. And for me, my family did not have a lot of sit down meals. And I mean, we were like really close, but just really busy. And both of my parents worked full time, and my mom just did not like cooking. And so when she got home from work at the end of the day, like the last thing she wanted to do was also keep working
Right.
and prepare a meal for all of us. And so most of the time we would just pull out a microwave meal and we would all sit in the living room with our TV trays and watch like Full House or whatever.
Yes.
Um, Thanksgiving was one of the few times of the year where we would sit down at the table and have a meal. And so it always felt really special. And for me, it's like there are certain foods that I really enjoy, but more than the food, it's just a time for everybody to sit down and be together and have those meaningful conversations. And so it's fun for me as a mom now to kind of figure out what are those things that I want to incorporate and what kind of memories am I making for my kids. And it's so wild growing up, because you have your own childhood and then like becoming a mom, it's like, oh, I'm like cultivating this experience for them. And but I really love Thanksgiving. It's just such a wonderful time to be with family, and that's just one of the most important things to me.
Yeah. So, what are some of those things that you have cultivated for your family now for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, well, what's fun is we will spend it with relatives. So, every year, if we spend Thanksgiving with my parents and my side of the family, then we'll spend Christmas with my husband's, and then the next year it flip-flops.
Mhm.
And so there are always like lots of people around, and it's been so fun to see like as my girls have gotten older. I have two daughters. One is 15 and the other one just turned 13.
Aw.
And it's been so cool to see how their relationships have changed with family over the years. And like with my sister and her husband, they're like relating to them more as adults now and having full-on conversations versus when they were little, it was just like, please don't eat all the candy right now, right before dinner. It's
Yeah.
all about kind of uh, just maintaining some semblance of order and not letting things devolve into total chaos. And just like watching those relationships blossom with my relatives and Dave's relatives, I think is just so valuable. And I read somewhere that kids who know their family history are way more grounded and way less prone to anxiety and depression.
Huh.
I just thought that was so interesting. I
Yeah.
think it's just a reminder that they're not an island and they're part of a story that's much bigger than themselves.
hmm I love that. That's so cool. I think too about even just my story growing up. It was always, we always had the kids' table. But then as we got older, my grandpa, he was able to kind of take a big sheet of plywood and stretch it across two tables to bring everybody all together. And it was just a cool experience for us all to be at the like same table. So it was just
Yeah,
neat for us.
totally. It's like a rite of passage.
Yes, for sure. So, on the Thanksgiving table, what are the must-haves in your opinion?
Okay, turkey for sure. Um, I grew up with, I mean, like I told you before, my mom does not love cooking. And so it's just like all the simple things. So like stovetop stuffing, it just
Okay.
has this like nostalgia.
Yes.
Hawaiian rolls,
Oh,
which
yes.
I don't know is if it's like a traditional Thanksgiving thing, but it is in my family. So we always have that. But I've realized that I also like something, there needs to be like some acidic thing.
Hmm.
Like because in the traditional Thanksgiving meal, there's just like a lot of starch and a lot of like really delicious, like, but heavy flavors.
Yeah.
And to like balance it out, it's nice to have a little bit of acid. And so that's where the cranberry comes
Mm,
in,
okay.
a little tart sweetness. And so I'll normally bring some sort of like cranberry relish that's like, has some like pineapple juice in it and stuff. Um, and like my family will eat that, and my sister's husband will eat it, but not like my parents or my sister. They're like, no, thanks. Because it's something like we did not grow up with. And then my mom will also make, it's funny that it's called a salad, like Hawaiian salad or
Okay.
ambrosia. It's sometimes called, but it has like marshmallows in it.
Yes.
It's like marshmallows and maraschino cherries and um yeah, it's like very much a dessert, but it's included on the table amongst like the gravy and the
Yeah.
all oh, mashed potatoes for sure. Those are
Yes.
a definite staple. But what's been cool is like, so my sister got married a few years ago, and her husband really loves to cook.
Mhm.
And so he's bringing some of his dishes that he grew up with, like sweet potatoes. Like we never grew
Mhm.
up with that, but in his family, they always had two different sweet potato dishes versus our zero. And so he always makes that, and he and I pretty much are the only ones who eat the sweet potatoes, but I really like them.
That's awesome. And growing up, it was like, it tastes weird, but now, and my husband, he thinks it's a dessert. So when he tried the one my aunt made, he was like, We could make this for dessert." I'm like, this is not a dessert. This is part of Thanksgiving dinner. So, I was gonna ask you, does anything from your garden make it on the Thanksgiving table, or is most of the garden stuff just like summer, we eat it as it comes? Okay.
Yeah, no, there's nothing from my garden that makes it onto the table, especially because by that time, yeah, all of the summer vegetables are done, and it's more like the kale and Swiss chard, which like my family will not eat, like way too healthy. Yeah, so the garden is kind of more of a summer thing.
Gotcha. So tell me about your garden. It's a summer garden. What kinds of things do you plant and harvest?
Sure. Well, I kind of tiptoed my way into gardening. It was something that I wanted to try, but wasn't sure about. And so I started with just like a simple put together little garden bed that I ordered off the internet.
Hmm.
Um, and it did well the first year. And so I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I was ready to kind of step things up a little bit. And a friend of mine told me about this woman on Instagram who just had these really great gardening tips. And so I started following her, and I found out that she had a book. And it's this woman named Nicole Burke,
Mhm.
and her Instagram handle is called Gardenary.
Yeah.
And I just loved all of the photos and videos she shared because in my mind, a garden was always a little bit messy and something that would be a hobby and fun to harvest from, but like a little bit of an eyesore. And my yard is very small.
Mhm.
And so I always had kind of mixed feelings about, do I want to take up the square footage and the visual space with this
Right.
thing that like looks a little bit unsightly? And but then when I started to see the photos on this Gardenary account, my mind was blown because it was beautiful and functional. And she talked about something called a kitchen garden, which I guess is different than a vegetable garden, which I
Okay.
didn't know. I mean, I'm such a beginner. And a kitchen garden is typically a little bit smaller and it needs to be close to the kitchen so that you can just like run out and grab a few things to use with the meal that you're making. And she does a lot of raised beds. And so I got her library book. Like I got her book out of the library and I hired a friend to build these two raised beds and I had them installed in my yard. And it was in 2020 when, you know, we were spending a lot of time at home.
Yeah.
It was just the perfect time to like, okay, we're gonna invest in the garden this year because we're
Hmm.
gonna be home. And then it had a metal arch trellis
I love that.
between the two raised beds. And so then we planted tomatoes at the base of the trellis on both sides. So over the summer, the tomatoes grow up and over the trellis, and it's so pretty. Um, and then eventually, you know, I tagged this woman, Nicole, in my posts and she wrote back to me. And then it turns out that she used to live in Nashville and was about to move back to Nashville. And so she said, I'd love to come help you with your garden if you want. And I said, yes, please. And so a few months later, she came and she helped me plant a bunch of new plants and told me some like tips and tricks. And I mean, things that like a lot of things that seem obvious, but weren't to me at the time. Like plant things in the back that grow the tallest, and things that might cascade over the side, like put those in the front, and also that you can ignore the directions on the plant tags that say like don't plant more than or less than 6 inches apart. And what I learned from her is that those directions are basically for farmers who grow these crops for a living.
Hmm.
Um, and there's this thing called intensive planting where you just like cram as many plants in there as will fit. And they kind of end up helping each other. Like they shade the little ones and they keep pests away more, especially if you plant like garlic and rosemary and, you know, certain
Yeah.
plants that bugs don't like to smell. Um, and so it's just like every spring, it gives me something to look forward to, and it just feels like magical every time. It's just something that starts so small, becomes so big, and then it grows these nourishing foods for our bodies. And it's like it really does feel like a miracle every
Yeah.
time.
That's amazing. I love that. So you wrote a song about it called
Yes.
Gardening, which I stumbled upon and thought that was so cool that you wrote a song about it. So tell me about that process of, I mean, you start gardening, it's become more of a passion for you, and then you write a song about it. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I just realized so I'm very prone to anxiety and worst case scenarios, and I have to work hard to not spend all of my time worrying about things.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's something that God has brought a lot of healing for in my life over the years, but it is I don't know. I think I'm always going to be prone to it, and I am aware of that. And so I think that was just something unexpected about gardening, like how much it would help me with mental health.
Mhm.
Just there's something about just that scene change of walking out of my house, like feeling the sun on my skin and the breeze and hearing the birds. And I recently found out that having your hands in the soil can actually trigger serotonin in your
Oh,
body.
huh.
Yeah, it's like biological. Like gardening is good for your mental health, which makes so much sense to me based on my own experience. Because it's like I walk out there and I start working in the garden, like pruning the tomato vines, pulling off dead leaves, looking for pests, and I feel a sense of peace and calm, and it's been just such an unexpected gift.
Mhm. I love how in your song you talk about how it's a form of resistance in a sense.
Yeah.
That it's something, I don't know, for lack of a better word, tangible to do, to kind of keep the anxiety at bay. Because I relate to that so much, where it's like if there's something that can be done, or just basically in the fight with all that, the fight against mental health struggles, that there is something that can be done to help with that. I love that you just made a song about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an act of resistance against despair,
Hmm.
hopelessness. It's like you can just walk outside, put your hands in the dirt and grow something
Yeah.
to be generative, instead of focusing on all of the things that might be taken away from you, which I can totally do all the time if I let myself.
Uh-huh.
It's like the opposite of that. It's focusing on, okay, but what can I plant? What can I grow? And I really feel like it reflects the heart of God, like this idea of creating new life. I mean, not that I am making the plants grow, but it's like being part of the process and watching it unfold. It really helps kind of reframe everything.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, things are not as bad as I thought they were. Like there are beautiful things that are still growing despite adversity. When I'm picking off those dead leaves, or finding the pests, it's like, okay, these things, there are destructive forces in the world, but beautiful things grow in spite of all of that.
Yeah. I love that. So, in the season of winter, how do you, I guess, are you garden planning, or what do you do to kind of keep yourself at bay until you can start gardening again?
I I haven't decided my strategy yet. Like I told myself this year that I wasn't going to do a fall garden.
Mm,
Um because okay, here are the pros and cons. I'm just going to
yeah.
think out loud here. Um I like taking a break from gardening because it helps me have time to get really excited about spring and doing it all over again. Cause
Yeah.
I can kind of get tired of things after a while. Like I love variety.
Mhm.
Like my husband teases me that my favorite meal is just a fork full of everything, which is true. And that's kind of how I live my life. It's like I just love doing little bits of all sorts of things. Um and I'm kind of learning to give myself permission to do that. It's because it's an interesting dichotomy of like, I'm very much like that, but then I'm also like I have perfectionistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And so when I try something, I also want to be like amazing at it.
Yes.
So trying to like hold those two things is a challenge sometimes. So my plan was to take a break, fall and winter, and then come back strong to gardening in the spring. However, there's a garden store on my way home from dropping off my child at high school. And I just decided to stop in real fast and I ended up buying a bunch of plants. So
Yes.
I bought thyme and rosemary and kale, a bunch of pansies. So I don't know. I'm holding it loosely.
Yeah.
The other drawback of having a fall and winter garden is eventually my irrigation gets shut off,
Yeah.
which means that I'm in charge of watering the plants on a consistent basis, which has varying results. But I don't know. I could not resist buying
Yeah.
more
I love
plants.
it. I love it. So last question for you. The number one thing that God has taught you through gardening.
Hmm, that is a good question. The first thing that comes to mind, I think, is just to be faithful,
Mm.
uh, to show up and bring what I have to offer. With gardening, every year is a new adventure because you could do the same exact thing that you did the year before and have totally different results. So it's the experience of being totally out of control. And you just have to go with the flow and hold things loosely, but also know that if I didn't show up, like everything would die and things would go badly. And so it's like, I do have like an effect, but it's not all in my control. And so it's just the consistency of like, okay, God, here I am. I'm going to do what I can, offer what I have, but ultimately you're in charge and you're going to do what you want. And then to just like sit back and watch this beautiful thing unfold.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, JJ, for being a part of the podcast today. And you can listen to Thanksgiving Song on Shine.fm through Thanksgiving. And you can follow JJ on Instagram at JJ Heller Music and also listen to her song Gardening, which is out there as well. And have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks so much. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.